Every first-year econ student learns about the prisoner's dilemma. It goes like this. So the cops catch 3-4 guys committing some kind of bank robbery, say. Take them downtown. They stick them in separate jail cells. They say, listen, we know you guys did it, but we don't feel like going out and collecting the evidence, so we're just going to do this. Whoever gives us a confession, tells us what really happened, you get to go free while your 3 other buddies will go to jail, okay? And they're not going to let them sit there and talk about it. They're going to be in separate cells. And the economist, and so the guys figure something out, and probably eventually somebody comes out and spills the beans. So economists use the prisoner's dilemma in order to explain why economic monopolies are not sustainable. Somebody's always going to want to cheat. Like OPEC, you restrict production, raise price. So everybody's looking out of the corner of their eye going, can I get away with, even though I told everybody I'd only produce 1 million gallons, what if I produced 1.5 million? Maybe I wouldn't get caught. I used to think of the prisoner's dilemma every time I wondered about this coalition inside the Democratic Party. And Stephen Sowell is the one who's really given credit for being the first one to figure this out. And so we look at the Democratic Party as a coalition of all these groups, but they're necessarily competing groups. I mean, who do we have? We have the fellas, we have the Hispanics, we have women, we have labor unions, environmentalists. There's probably 10 more I'm leaving out. I mean, they all can't get what they want all the time. I mean, the labor unions go in and say, hey, we want to build that big building, or we want to build that housing project out there. And the environmentalists come in and go, no, we don't want that. So, I mean, how do you resolve that? Well, why don't they just break it off? I mean, speaking of labor unions, I mean, they were originally formed very explicitly to keep black people out of the trades. And now flash forward 60, 70, 80, 100 years later, we have black people sitting down with labor unions, holding hands, making plans, as if none of that ever happened. Well, it was Steve Sowell who solved that problem. It was Steve Sowell, I think, I just read this year from VDare, This Week in VDare, they're talking about this, and they said, well, Steve Sowell was the one in 2013 who looked at it and said, listen, the only thing holding together this, bag of fighting cats is they're all united in one thing. They're all united in anti-whiteness. They don't really like white people. And that's what keeps them all together. Otherwise, they just would have split up a long time ago and reformed along different lines. And so, Alana Mercer had a column about this. Has a column about that this week. A really good column. There's so many good columnists out there. Alana Mercer's one of them. We just spend so much time reading people, paying attention to people that we're supposed to, maybe with a slightly bigger audience than Ilana, but there's so many good, smart people out there, and Ilana's right on that list. Why don't we go through a little bit of Ilana's column? It's called, It's Not Identity Politics, It's Anti-White Politics. This is from Town Hall. And the subheadline is, Alana Mercer sees growing animus towards pale-faced males in media and academia. Okay, let's get rolling on this column. Every time a manifestly racist anti-white event goes down, which is frequently, conservative media calls it identity politics. The left is playing identity politics. Whatever is convulsing the country, it is not identity politics. For blacks are not being pitted against Hispanics, Hispanics are not being sicked on Asians, and American Indians and Ameri-Indians, I think immigrants from India, aren't being urged to attack the groups just mentioned. Rather, they're all piling on honky, hence anti-white politics or animus. The ire of multicultural multitudes is directed exclusively at whites and their putative privilege. Anti-whiteism is becoming endemic and systemic. Take Empire actor Jussie Smollett. Smollett deceived the country and the Chicago Police Department about having fallen prey to a hate crime, which it transpired he had crudely orchestrated. The Chicago police superintendent expressed the requisite righteous indignation that a black man would desecrate symbols of black oppression in the process of framing innocent others. He's talking about that noose that Smollett used. Smollett. Nobody, Superintendent Eddie Johnson included, said sorry to the accused group whose reputation had been sullied. Quote, Trump supporters or white persons. Trump supporters is indeed a proxy for white persons. The conflation of white and Trump supporter was made for one by an anti-white, anti-Trump professional agitator, Trevor Noah of The Daily Show. Noah is neither funny nor bright, but he is right in this instance. Conservatives, for their part, persist in skirting the the white animus issue. The Smollett libel fit the progressive narrative they intoned. It was a right versus left matter, that's what others said. And she just goes on reminding people about all these examples, whatever you want to call it, strip away the veneer, and it's all about people directing all this hatred at white people. Doesn't that make you uncomfortable to even hear that expression? It does me. I mean, because I don't want to be lumped in with a bunch of people who self-identify as Nazis or Jew haters, and I just don't want it. And I think a lot of people are like that. I mean, there are other positions in this country besides being totally race conscious on the black side and totally race conscious on the white side. There are people in the middle. I think I'd like to be there, where we're just trying to get by every day, one foot in front of the other. And we're not race conscious, but that doesn't mean we're going to ignore the dangers of being other people who are racially consciousness when they direct that racially conscious hostility at us. I mean, if you're racially conscious, if you consider yourself really racially conscious, doesn't that necessarily mean there has to be, like, if you want to lift up one group based on their race, you have to kind of like push another group down? Yeah, of course it does. That's what Ilana Mercer's talking about here. And we like to call it a name. Well, they're playing identity politics. No, thank you, Ilana. They're just directing their ire and hatred and hostility at white people, and white people are just deathly afraid to call people out on it. So thanks for figuring that out for us, Ilana, and helping us to figure out that we've got to be a little braver. We have to speak a little more plainly when we see how this is being called out or not called out. So what we do around here is we try to call it out. We try to demonstrate. We try to document. We do document all these examples of black on white hostility. And most of the time for me, white is shorthand for, black on white, black on young, black on old, black on gay, black on straight, black on Asians, black on Amish, black on Eskimos, black on kitties, puppies, turtles, and goldfish. Okay, do you see a little common thread running through there? So we document that as a way of documenting this enormous level of black on white hostility, this identity politics we're talking about. We're not going to call it that anymore. We're going to call it anti-white politics. We document that here because whatever we call it, the weak part of this entire enterprise is the hostility they direct at us, the physical criminal hostility that is directed at white people. That's the most dramatic manifestation of this identity politics, anti-white politics that there is. And it's not just the crime, right? It's also the denial, deceit, and delusion. We got into it with Tim Kaine. I don't know why I keep calling him Tim Kaine. That's the vice president, the guy who ran for vice president. Tim Wise, he kind of invaded one of my timelines and he started telling all my followers we're frauds. Stuff in my book is made up. It's unverifiable, this and that. So I said, hey, Tim, hey, A, you're wrong. B, yeah, some of the links in my book some of the links in my book don't work, that's because you and your buddies went to YouTube and succeeded in having them removed. But the stories are true. And all of the stories are true. And none of these stories or any of these stories where it's like, yeah, well, I'm actually going to do one of these stories in about 5 minutes. But until then, on these big stories, I don't really come at you and go, well, I have two sources. I have a source inside the police department that's telling me this happened, that happened, and nobody else knows about it yet. No, what I'm basically doing is saying, listen, this reporter saw this, but they just didn't report the whole thing, and it didn't connect it to a pattern of that other kind of violence. Boom, 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 boom. And so we're documenting the violence and the denial. Violence and the denial as it is an expression now of Alana Mercer's latest column, an expression of racial identity politics. Oops, I'm not using that term anymore. Anti-white politics, anti-white sentiment. God, how else are we keeping all those? How else are we keeping all those people together in the Democratic Party? Whenever everything seems to just crack apart, they all just look each other in the eye, take a step back, and goes, "Hey, everybody, just remember, white people suck really bad." Everybody looks at each other. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right, Colin. They really suck. So let's just remember that. Whatever else we do. But whenever we talk about these episodes of black violence and whatever many, many, many different forms they take, I don't really consider them political acts. I just, not really. I mean, I don't think the people committing these crimes are overly politically conscious, but I do consider them a result of this anti-white stuff, what we do get all the time around here, and that's kind of like. We see it in the newspapers, we see it in public officials, and so somehow the people we're going to meet here in a second, somehow they've gotten the impression, however vaguely, that white people suck and it's pretty much okay to do whatever the hell you want to them. So why don't we just go through a couple of examples of that, and why don't we start off with a couple of examples of some black mob violence. Here's one from the streets of Portland. You know, this is not the first time we've done this. Is going to be some black on Asian violence out of Portland. This is not the first time we've done stuff like this out of Portland. I remember in my book White Girl Bleed a Lot, we did a story about a bunch of Asian people living in an Asian neighborhood in Portland. All of a sudden, this Asian gay guy gets killed. He gets knifed. And so his friend goes down there and his friend was remembered that, yeah, that happened to me a few months ago. I didn't get killed or knifed, but a couple fellas came along and beat me up pretty good. So after that happened, he started knocking on his neighbors' doors. And he said, out of the 50 doors he knocked on, 47 other people, mostly Asian, said, yeah, they had been the victim of some kind of black violence over the last couple of years. This is in Portland, Oregon, where everybody is so damn smug and proud that everything in Portland is so fine and perfect, and they are immune to all the vices that make the rest of the country a big hellhole, but not Portland. I mean, there was a guy in Portland, again, this is in one of my books. A guy was, I think he was like a bicycle messenger. So he was riding on they have a big organized bicycling community in Portland. And so he was riding his bike through Portland. A bunch of fellas just came up, got one of those traffic cones and just clocked him with it, knocked him off his bike. He landed on his face, broke up a bunch of teeth, and it was nasty business. Local TV news director comes out and goes on his TV and he says, listen, we want to prove to this guy that Portland is made up of nice people. So let's raise $5,000 or whatever it was so we can put his teeth back together again. Meantime, the bike attacks just kept happening. It was a thing. If a bunch of fellas saw a white guy on a bike, they would attack him. And finally, they had a newsletter where the president of like the Portland Bikers Group, bicyclist, he started explaining it thusly. He said, well, I know that's happening, but we have to look inside of ourselves and ask ourselves why this is happening to us. And could it be that we're not very inclusive? After all, we don't have many black people in our club. And that's probably why all this stuff's happening. And so the people in Portland, to me, that's suicidal, right? If you can't look at somebody in the eye and say, what the hell did you just do to me or my friends? After something really bad happened, if you can't do that, you stick up for yourself and defend yourself. And instead you go, oh, I'm sure you have very good reason to knock my friend off his bike and almost kill him and break his face into a bunch of different pieces. Man, we're really sorry we made you do that. That's what they do in Portland. That's suicide. That's suicidal. Did you guys ever see that? Did you guys ever see that TV show, South Park? Okay, it's a little intense sometimes and graphic, but sometimes it's the funniest show on TV. They have a show called Smug, and it involves Portland and San Francisco, and you guys would get a kick out if you went and tracked it down on your pay-per-view or watch on demand TV. So let's get back to Portland. Lots of bad business in Portland. Here's the latest. This was just in the news the other day. Here's the headline. Portland purse snatchers target elderly Asian women. At least 12 thefts since early December took place in the Jade District. That's what the police say. Quote, a string of purse snatchings in recent months appears to have targeted elderly Asian women in Portland's Jade District. Crime Stoppers says at least a dozen reports, pedestrian thefts and robberies. They tell where it is. At least two of the people were hurt. There may have been many more robberies that have gone unreported, said the editor of the Portland Chinese Times. They're unreported due to language barriers. She said the robberies has made women afraid to go out alone. Apparently they have some undercover people working the J District to catch the people involved in the thefts. And they have at least 4 different black men doing it. They've been caught on camera trying to use the victim's credit cards, blah, blah, blah. Black on Asian violence. You don't hear, the Asians to me are the big mystery of this Democratic coalition. I don't think they're active members of it, but they vote like 60, 70% Democrat consistently. But you see Asians in the bigger cities, especially the newer ones. Maybe they're setting up a little store in the ghetto. They are victims of constant, relentless black abuse, envy, hostility, theft, assault, murder. In San Francisco, they call black on Asian violence that town's dirty little secret. They figured out that 80% of the street robberies over a certain period of time in San Francisco was black on Asian. They went to the Asian people and they said, hey, what's up with that? They go, hey, it's no surprise to us. Don't come at us. We already know this. Sacramento, South Sacramento, enormous amount of black on Asian violence. Over and over and over and over. The people running Sacramento down with the cause. They do all the normal, hey, man, we're not going to take this. Not on my watch. No. Nothing happens. This happened 12 times before somebody saw a pattern, at least 12 times. It probably happened more than that. We know that victims of violent crime are only reporting their violent crimes about half the time, at the most. So we have 25 examples of black people in this one neighborhood, the Asian neighborhood of Portland, Oregon. And it takes a couple of months for somebody to look around and go, hey, I think I see a pattern here. No patterns. Nobody catching the bad guys out there in Portland, Oregon. in Philadelphia, they saw a pattern, a very clear pattern. The black people, it was 2 years ago, the Asians were under such enormous hostility, violence, and pressure in Philadelphia. They actually had a parade, a demonstration, probably 1,000 of them walking down the street in Philadelphia. They had signs and placards going, "Stop the violence against Chinese people." And nobody said where the violence was coming from. It wasn't coming from white kids, wasn't coming from Korean kids, it was coming from black people, but nobody would say so. Flash forward a year later, there's a bill in front of the Philadelphia City Council. One of the black members of the council was going into one of these corner liquor stores, and she saw there was plexiglass up, and she took a plexiglass to separate her hostile black customers from the friendly Asian people who own the place that are just trying to make a living by working 12 hours a day in that hellish neighborhood. Became a thing in Philadelphia. We're going to take that plexiglass down. We're not going to let anybody else put the plexiglass up. So they had a hearing at City Council for 3 hours. One black and white person after another went to this stand to remind everybody how much this plexiglass really sucks, how it's a bad message, how it's an insult to black people, because why would you think anybody think that black people are any different than anybody else when they go into their stores, they just buy their stuff, nobody steals anything, nobody robs anybody, nobody threatens anybody, nobody's throwing food at somebody. All of which are all those assertions transparently not true. Because we know that from videos. We know that these Chinese takeout places, these Chinese corner stores, they're just occasions of black violence and hostility on Asian people all the time. So after 3 hours of just sitting there listening to these fairy tales of how black people are being thoroughly repressed and oppressed by Asian people all the time because they insist on having these protective plexiglass windows in some of their businesses, finally, somebody figured out, 3 hours, after 3 hours, somebody finally figured out, hey, we have some Asian business owners over there. They've been waiting to talk for 3 hours. And they are just sitting there with the enormous amount of dignity, reserve, politeness, and they got up there and they just reminded everybody how dangerous it is. Nobody was angry. Everybody was very calm. They said their piece. Then everybody ignored them. Nobody gave a damn about the enormous, how hard they work, how dangerous it is for them, and how it's all a black on Asian thing. And now we have the same thing going on in Portland. Dozens and dozens of Asian people are under attack, and it didn't just start now. It's been going on for a long time. Lots of Asians in Portland. And we're all just supposed to sit here and go, well, I don't know. Maybe they're gonna. Maybe we'll hear exactly what they said when they figured out that for years, every day, students at South Philadelphia High School, Asian students at South Philadelphia High School, were being attacked, harassed, bullied, threatened. Till finally one day, 13 of these Asian students had to go to the hospital because it was Beat an Asian Day in South Philadelphia High School. Finally, they went up the ladder to the started the teacher. I can't do anything, security guard. I can't do anything, principal. I can't do anything, superintendent. They go to the superintendent of schools of Philadelphia high schools. And she goes, well, here's a flyer. This will teach you how not to antagonize the black students so they won't beat you up anymore. Because that's what the superintendent was also whispering to reporters, that the Asian students, there was only a smattering of them in this school, like 95% black school, a couple of Asian immigrants. All they wanted to do was study. So the superintendent started whispering to reporters that, hey, Asian students, they're kind of like impolite to black people, and that's why they're getting the crap beat out of them all the time. Wow. So maybe that's the case of these older women in Portland. They don't know how to behave around black people. They are not reaching out and making the black people feel welcome in the Jade neighborhood of Portland, Oregon. God, how many times have we heard that? From the St. Louis, from entertainment districts in St. Louis or Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia or Los Angeles or San Francisco, you see some bit of black argy-bargy, large scale, frequent, long time. Well, why is that happening? Well, the business owners have not been very good at reaching out to the black people. Oh, and that's why the black people are robbing, assaulting, and committing crime wildly out of proportion in this neighborhood. Oh, I didn't say that, Colin. I'm just saying the business people didn't really reach out. That's what Laurie Cumbo said when all the black people were rampaging through Brooklyn, attacking old Jewish people and young Jewish people dressed in traditional Jewish clothing. They didn't share their success, Colin. They didn't reach out to the black people to share their success. We got to do better. Why don't we go from Portland, to one of my favorite cities, Indianapolis, home of the Indiana Black Expo, where every summer, because for 10 years, they had the Indiana Black Expo. A couple 100,000 black people would descend on Indianapolis for all sorts of cool stuff. And the convention center, all involving black people are great and white people suck. Then after the convention would go on the streets of Indianapolis and just tear the place down and leave mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of trash all the time. Finally, a couple years ago, the people in Indianapolis said, we really, sorry to say this, people, but we really don't want to do this anymore with you guys in our downtown. We just don't want you destroying it after your little Indiana Black Expo. So they did the same thing to Indianapolis that they did to Miami Beach during Black Beach Week. They just turned downtown Indianapolis into a military camp. Helicopters, big bright lights, a lot of them, dogs, lots of cops, motorcycles, horses. That calmed things down quite a bit. But Indianapolis is a weird town because, when I think of Indianapolis, I used to always think of it as kind of Indiana, right? Kind of bucolic, picnic baskets with fried chicken, buttermilk covered by those, red and white checkered tablecloth things. It turns out to be Indianapolis turns out to be a center of black violence and denial. Lots of bad business downtown, so bad that whenever the Nordstrom leaves the downtown, they built this huge gleaming mall downtown. I think what'd they call it? The Indianapolis Circle or something. I forget what they called it. But they had a big old Nordstrom in there. When Nordstrom leaves, that's the canary in the coal mine. They left because there was an enormous amount of large-scale black mob violence in downtown Indianapolis, not just on Black Expo either. Other times. All on video. We did tons of stories on this. The people in Indianapolis, they just were so taken off of this. They so taken aback by this. They're still practicing their Midwestern nice traditions. They just can't believe what they had on their hands. So whenever this was happening, they would just go down there with a bus and they say, "Okay, youngsters, you've had your fun blowing off some steam now." And they would basically go, "F you!" One of those deals. Lots of bad business in Indianapolis. Lots of it. They had I forget his name. He just left the paper. About 5 years ago, they had a reporter at the Indianapolis Star-News. We're actually going to get to this Indy story here in a minute. The Indianapolis Star-News. And he said he went to church that weekend, and his pastor in a nice, safe suburban church was challenging people in his church, saying, "Hey, don't just talk about racial equality. You got to get out there and do something about it." So he wrote a column and he said, "You know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to move my wife and my 2 young teenage girls down to the ghetto of Indianapolis. And we're going to prove, like once and for all, white people, black people, we can all live together in peace and harmony." I really was looking forward to like a diary from this guy once a week at least. Anyway, he just kept doing his regular job, except he and his family were living there. And about a year later, he wrote a column saying, Yeah, well, we moved in. So they found this like little enclave, right? This little hipster enclave inside the ghetto. People raising chickens down there and all that kind of stuff. But after a while, so the first column, he started writing about, oh, yeah, we got a burglar in our neighborhood. Everybody knows who he is. He's just kind of part of the neighborhood. Then his daughters are going to this black school. We never really learned more about that other than we were just, we saw pictures. They were in dance class together. They're in this together. They're in that together. Music. Everybody's all happy. I think there weren't that many white kids in that school, but we never really heard from them. We never really heard what it was like to get their kids to and from school. We never heard what it was like to be a white kid in a chocolate school. Was it okay? Everybody happy? They were getting good grades? No threats of physical violence? No physical violence? None of that stuff? They didn't see anything like that? We've seen what happens in too many chocolate schools to take that kind of fairy tale seriously. Anyway, I think he only wrote like one other story about that. I think somebody got killed in his neighborhood, and he wrote one of these. Well, the neighborhood's going through some changes, one of those deals. So just, I think a few months ago, he decided he was going to quit and take a job with the local healthcare outfit. So whatever happened? I mean, when he went down there, we never know. But in Indianapolis, we know this. Big headline in the Indianapolis TV station. I don't think the paper covered this. Person reports being attacked, robbed while jogging near Indy Canal. There's actually a lot of argy-bargy near that canal. Anyway, it was just it was like a typical story we've done on hiking and biking trails around the country before. Some lovely ladies, white chicks jogging on the trail. A bunch of black people come up, spray her in the face with some mace, knock her down, beat the hell out of her, steal all of her crap, all the while laughing. And this happened right near the NAACP headquarters. And I even think it's like on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Boy, what was it? I remember when one of the weird reasons I like to keep an eye on Indianapolis is because of that Indy Black Expo and what a catastrophe it was for that town. How so many people were in denial, deceit, and delusion about what was actually happening at that town. But Indianapolis is also the headquarters of the Society of Professional Journalists, a group that I was a member of for a long time because in order to enter their contests, you have to be a member. So I was a member, won a ton of awards from them for stories, getting a black guy out of prison for trying to kill. He was accused of trying to kill his white girlfriend. That was a big deal. Anyway, so Thomas Sowell, he wrote not just one, but 3 columns about my work, my books, and very complimentary. And to me, Thomas Sowell said, "Hey, I thought I knew a lot about this, but Colin Flaherty even knows more about it than I do," which is basically like you're at the Masters and Tiger Woods comes over to pull somebody out of the gallery and he goes, "Hey, this dude taught me how to golf. He's a better golfer than I am." That's exactly what that was. And so anyway, he wrote this column, and because he's such a big dog, Thomas Sowell is known as a big brain, known as the godfather of a lot of these areas in economics. And by the way, to be an economist really is to kind of like just look at what is really happening and not happening, and with some solid information, not some stuff that the sociologists and psychologists make up, on the fly. Anyway, so the Society of Professional Journalists headquartered out there, they ran a big column saying, a huge column. It said, Dr. Thomas Sowell wrote, he said, reporters aren't covering black violence. And he cited this really bad person named Colin Flaherty who's been documenting this. And then, so we're going to do a story about this, about how should reporters, figure out when to report race when it involves crime, violence, and mayhem. Long story. The end of the story was basically like, okay, you ready for the answer? Oh yeah, never report that. So And then, okay, so the society, I don't know if it's still that way today. I'm not going to look it up today, but last time I checked, I went to their headquarters. They're these protector of the black people, these benevolent protectors of black people. I wanted to see who was on their board of directors. All white people, all white, classic college textbook white liberals. Wow. So maybe they have some black people on their board of directors now. I don't know. But somehow somebody's going to explain why this group. So we got groups of black people rampaging through Portland doing this. Now we got groups of black people rampaging through Indianapolis, attacking people on this canal. And it's not just one time, it's been more than one, so people up there tell me. Now, why don't we move to another town and look at a story called Swarms of Kids Cause Mayhem at Restaurants. Okay, so it's a good story. The only thing missing is one thing. Who are the kids? They are black kids doing this. And that has no significance to that reporter. None whatsoever. They're doing it over and over and over every day for a long period of time, destroying property, assaulting people, defying the people who own the business. Well, we'll get into it. Let's just see the story.
They just need to be better people, act better people, and respectful.
Some businesses in Rantoul are getting trashed by groups of middle schoolers, and some parents say they've had enough. Good evening, I'm Paul Cicchini.
And I'm Jessica Coons. The problem has gotten so out of control, Rantoul police say they've put extra patrols in the area every single day of the school week. But even that hasn't stopped it from happening. WCIA3's Jennifer Jensen went into one of those businesses this afternoon and watched firsthand as kids got rowdy and started yelling. She has more from Rantoul.
It's a routine for many kids at J.W. Ader Junior High to go to Subway and Dunkin' Donuts after school gets out.
By 3 o'clock, there is an easy 20 to 30 kids in there, all of junior high age, being completely disrespectful.
It's also become routine for the businesses to ban large groups of kids from coming in.
They will be screaming profanities. I've seen them throw garbage. I've seen them throw things of water on each other.
Sylvia Zolfer goes to the Rantoul Dunkin' Donuts every week, a quiet observer of the mayhem that's been happening all school year.
There has been days actually too that I've came here and they actually have the doors locked and are just letting people in individually, so to keep the kids out.
Her son Christian is a student at J.W. Ader, and he's seen the chaos firsthand too.
They called 2 squad cars to come over here. Some actually got escorted to their house.
Rantoul police say they've been called there many times. Across the street at Subway, the scene is the same. The manager says kids will regularly throw food and walk on the tables.
The poor employees can only manage so much, but the kids are just completely unruly. It's completely unacceptable.
Workers at both Subway and Dunkin' Donuts say the swarm of kids are too rowdy to handle.
No human should treat another human that way, basically. I mean, you need to respect other people's property.
In Rantoul, I'm Jennifer Jensen, WCIA3, your local news leader.
Rantoul police tell us at one point they were getting calls every single day about the problems kids were causing at those businesses.
Some of these stories don't even make the papers. Now, this is the kind of stuff that's going to drive Tim Wise crazy. So a month ago, this happened a month ago. I'm at my little cigar store buying a couple of cigars. I go down and say, I might as well sit down with the fellas. And I actually saw one of the fellas, a black guy in there I actually knew. He was on the radio with my brother and me when we were doing more radio shows here. Talking, and you know, just casually he mentioned that, he was talking to one of his friends, and like the night before, 2 nights before, there was a party. The party was going on late at night, and they were like burning stuff on the lawn, setting people's porches on fire. So one of the neighbors goes out to the kids and he goes, "Oh, excuse me." This is like a black person. He goes out and goes, "Oh, excuse me, young black people. Would you try to refrain from burning the porches down and setting stuff on fire on the lawns? Because, well, we'd rather kind of not have you do that. Of course, here comes the expletives, the obscenities, all sorts of bad stuff. Cops showed up. Everything was done, they thought. Next day, a couple of dozen fellas came back looking for the guy who snitched them out. They're starting fires on his porch. Now they're stalking him. Flash forward till a couple days ago. I've only heard a little bit of this, so I'm trying to get more of it. So I don't know, it involves a synagogue. There aren't that many synagogues in good old Wilmington. The ones there are all kind of congregated around in one place. Not too far from where I am right now. Wilmington, Delaware. But the story I got from someone with first-hand experience and a member of the law enforcement community tells me that a couple of dozen black people were throwing rocks at a synagogue. I don't know if they broke any windows or not. Then the rabbi comes out and he tried to pull one of these, hey, let us be friends and peaceful. That didn't work. They started raining obscenities and rocks on this dude. Next thing you know, the cops all roll in, but the rabbi's out there going, hey, everybody, peace and love. We don't need to put those young men in jail. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do, right? Because you don't want to put them in the system, because once you put them in the system, once you put a black person in the system, they're never going to be able to get a job for the rest of their lives. All they're going to be able to do is smoke dope, use drugs, collect welfare, and we don't want that, do we, Colin? You don't want that, do you, Colin? That's the story. So we don't, because putting somebody in jail for committing a crime causes that person to have committed that crime. It's kind of like one of these science fiction quantum physics deals. Pluck a string today and it reverberates in something you did 10 years ago. Yeah, I watched too many science fiction movies. But back to the rabbi thing. So this is not in the paper. The city council's involved. It's all hush hush. They're all going through the old hand wringing. Oh my God, what did we do to fail these young black people that we forced them to go throw rocks at the synagogue? I mean, and the minister, the rabbi has to be looking at himself and going, to be truthful, I probably didn't reach out to those young black people the way I should have. I mean, I'm just sitting here in my nice synagogue with my nice car, my nice congregation. Everybody's very nice and polite. They're usually orderly. They obey the law. That's why we force those young people to come attack us. That's the way people think. The people doing the attacking know that. They know they can go around, attack, throw rocks at people's houses, throw rocks at synagogues, and nobody's going to come haul them off and send them to reform school. No, they're going to come pat them on the head and ask them to behave nicely and promise to reach out to them more in the future. Not making this up. I mean, and every day it seems like there's just, all these little jags in relationships between white people and black people, and white people are constantly trying to smooth the jags down. Come on, can't we get along? We don't want you to come robbing us all the time. He goes, screw you. You deserve it. Why don't we head down to, see, what town is this? I think this is somewhere in Georgia. Let's head down to Georgia for a story of a little bit of road rage against a white family. Got into a little bit of argy-bargy with a black woman in a car.
An incredible case of road rage ends with an entire family getting shot at.
It happened during morning rush hour in Brookhaven. Fox 5's Denise Dillon is live at the intersection of the shooting tonight. And Denise, how is that family?
Well, the parents are shaken up. The kids, well, they are terrified. One of the bullets went right through the vehicle, just missed a 3-year-old's head, and went through the shirt of a 6-year-old.
Looked like it fit a 9mm pistol, gray on top, black on bottom.
Chantel Queen says she doesn't know much about guns, but will likely never forget the image of the weapon that was pulled on her family. Queen was in her Nissan Pathfinder with her husband, 3 children, and a family friend. Her husband, Matt, was behind the wheel. The children were buckled up in the back.
My son was sitting right here.
Brookhaven police say the family was driving near the intersection of North Druid Hills and East Roxborough around 9:30 Thursday morning. Matt told police he was cut off by the driver of another car, Nokesha Jones. Queen told police he got out of his car to talk to Jones. That's when she pulled out a gun and started firing.
And then shot 2 rounds off in the road, aimed a little bit higher, shot 2 to 3 more rounds off at my husband's back and arm. The kids were in the truck screaming and hollering, and he was out there trying to get back in the truck.
Chantel says it was the final shot that scared them the most. The bullet went straight through her truck.
Okay, I don't know why that guy got out of that car. Okay? I don't know why you would do that when your family's in the car. So, I almost didn't include this one for that reason. But the fact is, that black chick got out of the car too, and she started shooting at that dude's car when there was a bunch of kids in there. So that was kind of crazy. So I'll let you guys figure it out. But in a case of... Okay, if you are going to confront a black person in public with anger, you better expect something's going to come back at you that you didn't expect to come back. That's all I'm saying. How many times have we seen that in a movie theater? White guy goes up to the black kids. Excuse me, young black people. My kids and I are trying to enjoy the movie back here, but you are preventing us from doing so because you are speaking too loudly during the movie. Could you keep it down some? Bing, bam, boom. There's the assault right there. But, so I don't know. Did the guy know that black chick was gonna get out with a gun and shoot at his family in the minivan? Not something I would have done, but hey, what do I know? Nothing. Okay. Then let's just finish this up with again another story. This has just put us in the Tim Wise world, where it's kind of a constant challenge of Tim. Show us the white kids doing this. Show us the white people doing this. Tim likes to weave these little stories about black people in prison for no reason whatsoever. That's why the pot story is so important. And if you see, and the pot story is important because the pot is the example of white kids getting away with stuff black people don't get away with. Because in Tim Wise's world, black people and white people use the same amount of drugs, same frequency, same intensity, but only black people get arrested. So that is like the big shining example of injustice in the criminal justice system. That's why we spend so much time here, as we did the other day, debunking that, reminding people that self-reporting is not a valid way to look at whether people are using drugs or not. And to look at the studies that said, the biggest indicator of self-reporting deception for drug tests, the biggest indicator is whether the person is African American. That's in a medical journal, the Journal of Addictive Behaviors. Tim freaks over that kind of stuff. Colin, black people and white people, they're using drugs in the equal amounts. Man, wouldn't it be amazing if that were true? I mean, so we know just from the get-go, for whatever reason, we know black people and white people are having different experiences in this country. We know the black kids, just from birth, 73% household without a father. Diet's bad. The educational environment's bad. Exposure to drugs is bad. Exposure to crime is bad. Exposure to alcohol is bad. Grade school. One bad experience after another in grade school. The worst thing a black kid can do in grade school is study because he's acting white. Everybody knows how bad that is. And so now the kids grow up, 12, 13, 14. They're having like living in parallel universes. One experience is chaos, mayhem, in school, out of school, violence. And the other one, if they're lucky, it's kind of a settled, the worst thing that can happen to me today is maybe somebody didn't get invited to a birthday party. Okay, and after going through these two different experiences, all of a sudden, the kids, at some magical way, they're using drugs. and selling drugs in the exact same proportion. I haven't checked this study yet. I just checked a little bit, but somebody sent me something the other day. Said, yeah, Colin, Tim Wise must not have known we did this study in this emergency room. It's in this journal. I looked it up. It was there, where when you take the blood tests in the emergency room, black people are at least four times more likely to be, have cannabis in their system. Again, the drug thing isn't that important by itself. It's only important to the extent that it casts a light over the entire system, and it demonstrates how the entire system is just one rigged game against black people. But they're using a rigged example that isn't true, and Tim insisted true. That's a fairy tale. That's a fantasy. But it's a fairy tale and a fantasy that is commonly accepted, and it's being used to shorten sentences. It's being used to give people second chances, air quotes. Just like this guy you're about to meet right here. Oh man, I almost did it again. I did that podcast last time. I was surprised at how long it was. Didn't want it to go that long. Our podcast about Tim Wise, the one before this. Hope you had a chance to check that out. Didn't want it to go that long, and I didn't want to forget that I just promised myself every time I was going to remind you guys what you can do if you really want to be a part of what we're doing around here. How you can support this channel. We're just going to do this every time because people, that's what they want to know. So I just want to keep reminding you of the small things. Share, like, subscribe, comment on this podcast wherever you find it. Or go to my Twitter feed, do the same thing. My Facebook channel, I'm not up on Facebook for 2 more weeks. I'm down over there. But I got lots of stuff over there you can comment on, share, even though I can't respond to it. And if you're on Facebook now, and you're sending me messages, I can't respond to anybody, okay? I'm in jail. But we're over at minds.com/Colin Flaherty. We're over at YouTube. I'm not posting these videos on YouTube, but if you just go to the search engine and put in Colin Flaherty, you'll see 2, 3, 4, half a dozen people are posting my videos over there. Faster than I can, almost as fast as I put them out, they're there. People do the same for BitChute. This is fantastic. I love when people do that. So that's one way you can participate. The other way, all these stories I'm reading here are just because people send them to me. I wouldn't have known about that thing in Portland had not somebody in Portland sent it. I wouldn't have known that stuff in Indianapolis had somebody in Indy sent it. So people are really, they know when something's weird about a story and they send it to me. And I like the ones we can fit into a pattern of denial, deceit, and delusion. If you really want to take it to the next step. Oh yeah, okay, here's another thing you just have to do. Go do it now. If you're not on my email list, you just have to get on there. I mean, I got kicked off of Amazon. One of my books was removed from Amazon the other day. Don't worry, I'm getting it put back somewhere else. And you'll be able to get it. It's going to take a couple weeks. But, I mean, so in the last month, I was kicked off of iTunes, suspended from Facebook for 30 days, and now one of my books is off of Amazon. So, again, I'm not really saying woe is me or anything like that. I'm saying, as one of our viewers over at Twitter talks about, he says, Colin, you always knew you were going to be operating behind enemy lines, and that's what we're doing. So we're not discouraged or frustrated. We are determined. Nobody is going to stop us from telling the truth about this. Capiche? I think you know that. That's why you're listening to this. And I think a lot of people are really pissed. The more they try to stop us, the more they pull our stuff down, you guys are just as determined as I am. A lot of people are, that they want to see this go up somewhere else and they want to see it continue. So get on my email list so you can be informed as we go from town to town, one step ahead of the posse that's coming after us. And if you want to take it to the next step after that, go to my store. It's at you can join my email list at colinflaherty.com. You'll see how to do it over there. If you go to colinflaherty.com, you'll see a little tab for merch. If you go in there, you can get yourself a coffee cup, a t-shirt. My favorite one, it says, "Truth is the new hate speech." Other people like the Denial, Deceit, Delusion cup and t-shirts. There's another one. There's a big picture of a rat. It says RAT, Routine Activity Theory. That's on a coffee cup. It's a little bit of an insider thing, but I kind of like it. So there's lots of cool stuff over there where you can have a little fun with this and support what we're doing here as well. And then, if you really want to go to the next level, the highest level, the gold level, drop a few coins in my PayPal account, paypal.me/Flaherty457, paypal.me/Flaherty457. Now again, just go over to, you can see how to do this over at colinflaherty.com. You'll see something that says contribute or support. You can do a monthly thing, you can do a one-time thing. It's up to you. But staying ahead of the posse, I do incur an expense doing that from time to time. Losing my book sales, that actually, that actually can be a little uncomfortable. And the great thing is, I'm amazed at how many people you guys know this on some level. I mean, people are figuring it out, and they're dropping a few coins in the PayPal account. They're sending me stuff to my house. You can see my address is easy to find. I'll give it to you right now. It's easy to find over at minds.com/Colin Flaherty. People send me stuff to my house. 712 West 26th Street, Wilmington, Delaware, 19802. Easy to find. I know, whenever I give this address out, people freak. Go, Colin, don't you worry about the fellas coming by your house and doing, X, Y, and Z. I don't worry about the fellas. I let them worry about me. That goes for my own personal safety. That goes for anything people say online or offline. I don't worry about what they say or do. I'm letting them worry about what we are doing and saying. So I'm grateful for all the support you guys are giving me. So let's get back to let's get back to what we're supposed to be doing around here, exposing this violence and denial, deceit, and delusion wildly out of proportion. This comes out of Charlotte, so everybody's living on this, woe is me, black people thing. They're going to jail for no reason whatsoever. Let's see what happens when we let somebody out of prison when maybe we never should have.
And we begin with a young mother's fight to survive. She was alone, waiting for an Uber when police say a man in these surveillance pictures grabbed her.
Well, tonight we know that he is a convicted criminal fresh out of prison, and she's sharing her story only with Channel 9.
I ended up face down. So, if he wanted to, he could have, decapitated me.
She spoke with our reporter Elsa Gillis about those scary moments near a bus stop in South Charlotte. Elsa, you're live at a different transit stop. That's one where the suspect was actually caught.
Yes, Scott, I'm standing across from the Tom Hunter station in North Charlotte. This is where police say security officers recognize the man in this photo here, leading to this arrest. And now the victim has a message she wants others to take from this story.
And I'm still a little traumatized. When I lay down in my bed, my heart races because I'm in the dark. And it's a scary sight because it happened in the dark,
It's been 3 days since this Charlotte woman was attacked at South Charlotte bus stop.
Physically, I'm here, but mentally, my mind is racing.
She was headed home from work Sunday night and had just gotten off a CATS bus.
As I was waiting for my Uber, my attacker came up behind me and he put me in a chokehold and forced me to walk with him. He was like, don't look at me. He was like, I got a knife.
But as he dragged her along, she fought back with one thing in mind.
I knew something had to be done in order for me to live another day and to live for my child. I pulled my taser out and I tased him, and it all happened so quick.
She says she fell to the ground and didn't let up until he ran away, but he left behind these wounds.
After I tased him, I guess that's what agitated him, and he just started going crazy. I just saw his arms moving.
She has 22 stitches. 10 in her face, 6 in her neck, and 6 in her wrist.
I'm grateful. I'm blessed.
With her accused attacker now behind bars, she's beyond grateful to law enforcement, but was at a loss for words learning of his violent history. Kelvin Jones spent over 11 years behind bars, just getting out in September, convicted for robbery with a dangerous weapon and sexual battery. And today, police address the high importance of his quick arrest.
We think that the potential for future victimization was extremely high.
All right, we're in the backstretch here. If any of you guys happen to run into Tim Wise online, he's Tim Jacob Wise on Twitter. At Tim Jacob Wise on Twitter. Let him know we're waiting for his myriad of examples. I mean, if I'm a fraud after 4 books, thousands of videos, hundreds and hundreds of articles, lots of things like this. I mean, if this has a fraudulent quality to it, there has to be something more to it than I talked about one sentence I would change in my book. There has to be more than that one sentence. Waiting, Tim. I won't be waiting too long. I wouldn't encourage any of you guys to hold your breath and waiting for Tim to produce this fairy tale he wants to make into reality. Because he knows talking about his fairy tales, being the white guy, the chosen guy to remind the country that all white people really suck. He knows no one has ever gotten fired for saying that. And no one's ever gotten fired for not making the black kids angry.